did a great job the other day on ad-libbing on the street videos. Dr. Long,
appreciate that.
Dr. Long shot me an email, and the title of the email was Street Videos, and he was yeah. So I thought, we're in trouble now.
No,
But,
street videos.
But street video.
Can I plug that in there?
As long as I can have street tacos in there somewhere.
You got a plug there? Try it. If it is, you got a plug.
This
try it.
man. See, this is what I've learned. I've learned that I can't take him anywhere.
All right, there you go.
I've learned that for sure.
He's trying to. He's already sent like 12 Instagrams and 42 tweets out. And what's up?
Unfortunately,
Go ahead, because you don't want to hear what I gotta say.
unfortunately, Dr. B, we put out tons of great quality work.
All right.
And the thing is, they see it.
Okay.
They might not click on it, but they see it. So, make sure I'm putting it in, an available space for them to see it. So that's
In their own time, because we understand people come to their, their own lights and understandings in their own time and space. So, it'll be out there. You can take your time, go do what you gotta do.
Well, I'm just glad to have you guys in the studio. That's all.
But Santi is the man, Dr. B. I just want to let y'all know Santi
All right.
is the man.
Santi, you were talking those street videos, and Dr. Long sent me he liked them, by the way. He really thought it was kind of cool ad lib about it. You guys were just
I was reading off
you
the
were
teleprompter.
freestyling. No, you were not. You were out there, man. And
The words were just,
I mean, the word came in. Somebody said the word alien, and then it was like, hey, you. Alien hunters, you need to have a podcast. I like it. So
gotta grab the attention.
That was very cool, very smooth, and I think that's an example too of just being yourself and being in the moment, and responding with that authenticity we were talking about a moment ago, and having fun at the same time. Now you can't have fun all the time because that doesn't necessarily make money. And move the part A down to part B. But
go back to your last point real quick. As far as one thing we've learned, and to what you just pointed on, being yourself. That's one of the main things that we've learned throughout working with everyone we work with is we had to stay true to who we were, regardless of what happened.
Makes sense.
We were put in a lot of different scenarios and situations and places where you're often given a choice. Do you be you, or do you switch it up? And we've, since day one, we've stayed true to ourselves. Comes with the good and the bad, but overall we like
comes with the bad.
Let's say sometimes it comes with the bad.
Not everybody's going to be a fan, right? I mean, you better.
There are a lot of non-fans.
Right. What you said.
All right, that's what he said. All right, so but I'm thinking you're right about that. But that that's part of life, and sort of moving through those moments. That it's not all about your hurt feelings, or it's not all about some thought you have in your head all the time. You got to kind of move on and get over that, and not be so self-critical, or not have your ego so fragile.
Egos are out there. If you want to be, I don't want to say, you got to, in order to be successful, you got to remove your ego, because there's a lot of successful egotistic people.
Oh yeah.
But
these days and times,
like he said, with these relationships nowadays, with the way the society is if you can just maneuver better, is that me?
I think that is.
If you can just maneuver better with people, aka, like you said, sometimes don't always think about yourself. Don't put you in front of everything. Things will work better, because if everyone is thinking about everyone else, then everyone is taken care of. It's that simple. Because if you're just only thinking about yourself and you can't care for another person, like no one else can be cared of than just you.
You did a great job the other day on ad-libbing on the street videos. Dr. Long,
appreciate that.
Dr. Long shot me an email, and the title of the email was Street Videos, and he was yeah. So I thought, we're in trouble now.
No,
But,
street videos.
But street video.
Can I plug that in there?
As long as I can have street tacos in there somewhere.
You got a plug there? Try it. If it is, you got a plug.
This
try it.
man. See, this is what I've learned. I've learned that I can't take him anywhere.
All right, there you go.
I've learned that for sure.
He's trying to. He's already sent like 12 Instagrams and 42 tweets out.
'Cause,
What's a
Unfortunately,
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Because you don't want to hear what I got to say.
unfortunately, Dr. B, we put out tons of great quality work.
All right.
And the thing is, they see it.
Okay.
They might not click on it, but they see it. So, make sure I'm putting it in, an available space for them to see it. So
In their own time, because we understand people come to their, their own lights and understands in their own time and space. So, it'll be out there. You can take your time and go do what you gotta do.
Well, I'm just glad to have you guys in the studio. That's all.
But Santi is the man, Dr. B. I just want to let y'all know Santi
All right.
is the man.
Santi, you were talking those street videos, and Dr. Long sent me he liked them, by the way. He really thought it was kind of cool ad lib about it. You guys were just
I was reading off
you
the
were
teleprompter.
freestyling. No, you were not. You were out there, man. And
The words were just,
I mean, the word came in. Somebody said the word alien, and then it was like, hey, you. Alien hunters, you need to have a podcast. I like it.
gotta grab the attention.
That was very cool, very smooth, and I think that's an example too of just being yourself and being in the moment, and responding with that authenticity we were talking about a moment ago, and having fun at the same time. Now you can't have fun all the time because that doesn't necessarily. And well, here's how it happened, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going out to my truck out the front door here at 1214 First Avenue to pick up a book that Dr. Hackett and I are going to do a Talk with Mike and Tom podcast coming up pretty soon. And happened to run into two of my favorite people walking down the street. I think I scared them just a little bit. Did I not scare you?
You scared me.
Okay, I didn't mean
Absolutely.
to. I did. That door
well, you know
opened.
what happened? You didn't scare me.
I think
Right.
I did.
I think you startled my very skittish significant other. And
Okay,
then
let's
he
get a
lunged up.
close up of him over there
Yes.
being skittish. All right, perfect.
Don't
That's
say
how
boo.
it looks.
Don't say boo.
think
And then he jumped. He lunged. Let me just use a better word. He lunged.
He lunged.
He did.
Yeah.
And then he startled me. And so then.
Well, it all happened when I opened the door. So
That's right.
Yes.
I want to apologize for my opening of the door.
I think
was
that's
trying to
it.
get out of the
I think
building. What
that's
did I
it.
do wrong? I don't know. And absolutely, there is no crime that's been committed here. Okay, I want to make sure. Is that true? Now,
True statement.
you have a background. You tell us a little bit about your background because you may know more about true crime than any of us. What do you think?
Maybe a little bit. I've never dabbled in criminal law.
Okay.
But I do have a background in law. I have a Juris Doctorate. So
Okay, so you're working as an attorney.
Yeah.
So you've probably seen some things around. Now you do have interest, and so maybe one of your interests.
Story to tell. Columbus Podcasting can tell your story with a world-class video podcast of professional quality. Viewers and listeners can access podcasts anywhere, anytime. ColumbusPodcasting.com. Give us a call today. You have a story to tell. Columbus Podcasting can tell your story with a world-class video podcast of professional quality. Viewers and listeners can access podcasts anywhere, anytime. ColumbusPodcasting.com. Give us a call today.
Because taking back and your idea of education, there was a big push a while back for data-driven decision making.
Right.
Those were the key words.
Right.
Sort of the buzzwords in education, probably in other places as well.
Yep.
Maybe even in government in some ways. But we need that data. We need the information in order to make a decision. That's where it fits. And then we've got to have lawmakers and people in government and the support of the general population to say this is an important issue. This is something we we'll all be better off if we tackle it and come out with a good solution for it. I don't think we're there with this tribalism and nationalism and other things that are going on right now.
Well, here's the other thing. The solutions are hard work.
Yes, they are.
Teaching children is a job that requires a tremendous amount of commitment and dedication and energy. Addressing the homeless situation, it requires that same kind of commitment and tremendous amount of energy. And, I think sometimes people may be a little afraid of those kinds of commitments. At the same time, growing crops in a drought requires a tremendous amount of commitment and energy. So, we take for granted that, whoever's doing the work of farming is just going to have to suck it up and have insurance to deal with the drought and come back strong. Well, you know what? I get that that's, if we're not successful there, we don't eat. But at the same time, if we're not successful with educating our young, then we don't have a strong economy. And if we're not successful in addressing mental health in a homeless situation, then who are we really as human beings?
Yes, that's a great question. Who are we, and what do we want, and how do we flourish in life? What is this? I mean, it's almost one of those basic questions, and I think he sort of addressed this at the beginning of the book, but I've heard others talk about this idea of really, it's an existential question. What are we here for? What do we do with our lives and so forth? He mentioned at one point the goal of maximizing human flourishing, life, health, happiness, freedom, knowledge, love, and the richness of experience. So we've got this life to live, and we probably should do a better job thinking about how we want it to be, and then acting on that and moving in that direction. Those are kind of tough questions for a lot of people who are just day to day. We're trying to figure out, how to pay the bills and how to move to the next thing, but I think that those are the big questions like that, and the ones you mentioned about mental health and homelessness and the problem with that, and coming up with a solution, coming up with a plan to deal with that so that all people can flourish and have a great life experience. Why not? Look at the trends that he's got in his book. Everything's getting better, so to speak, in quotes. But, why aren't more people enjoying it, and why are we sort of stuck in some misery somewhere? Big questions.
My only response has to do with me personally. And this is sort of a bellwether month and year for me for a lot of reasons. But you had asked me, I had mentioned to you earlier that I had been on a retreat. It was sort of a personally self-imposed retreat. I didn't go anywhere. I just hung around the house, did some reading.
I really, when you said retreat in your text, and I really thought, wow, he's with a group up on a mountain.
Up in the Rockies,
and you're doing these kind of things. But it's even better than that. This was a retreat you took for yourself, and I think that's a great idea.
And I just wanted to reflect on some things. And one of the outcomes of that, I sort of looked back at my life and looked forward too. And I found that the times when I felt the most alive and the times that I was the most effective were not the times when I was about me, myself. They were the times when I was about a mission, or about I was about Columbus State University, or I was about the Phoenix City Schools, or I was about the Alexander City Schools, or I was about my family. Those times when I was about me and what did I get and what was going to be meaningful to me, I found that I just sort of lost my way. So that's a gut check, and every day
we all need one.
Every day, I think it's a battle to make that realization for me. I don't know if that has anything to offer about a lot of these things.
No, I think it's great. And to take the time out, I guess that is kind of an issue that, well, I wanted to say something about reading a good book, or reading a book like this that has so much information on it, and we're reading less.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, that's kind of
That's
problematic.
another podcast, isn't it?
That's a whole nother thing. But I do think you're on the right track where you take a break, you do some inventory on what you want, where you're at, what you're going to do. Don't we all need to do that? And I'm not so sure everybody, the Joe walking up and down the streets doing that. I want to wave the flag out there and say, hey, stop and think, reflect, be introspective, think about the future, think about the past, figure out your next steps. And it's not about you. It's about how you can help other people. And as soon as we get everybody on that train, I think we're going to be better off.
In full disclosure,
thought,
though,
anyway.
When I was working full time and had a lot of responsibilities on my plate, it was a lot more difficult. As an old retired professor, I actually have the time to do this, so I'm not advocating it necessarily as, hey, I did it, and that kind of thing.
No, but I think it does make sense, and I'm all
Yeah.
about folks taking time out to really think about what they want and how they're going to get it, what's stopping them from getting it, making good decisions that not only affect themselves but affecting others. So we try to do that in our counseling efforts, and I think it's something that we probably need to do as individuals. All right, my friend Dan, how are you today? Welcome to the studio. What's going on with you?
I'm a little sleepy. I am. It's when it's cold. It's just turned colder. Our version of cold.
That's right.
So I'm a little. I was napping a bit before we cranked this up.
Well, it's a beautiful Saturday morning outside. A little
Right.
crisp in there. We're getting the weather change. I think we're changing the time. We're going to daylight savings again tonight. I think it's going to mess
just-
up everything. I'm sure.
Just like Cher says, turn
What?
back time.
Okay. There's a reference from the 80s.
There
All
you
right,
go.
I love it.
I like any day you can talk about Cher is a day.
Yeah, I like
Dana.
Cher. Cher's all right. I mean, she's hung in there for so long. That's a good
Yeah,
thing.
she's 123.
Yeah.
She
That's
is.
that's another.
She used to be married to Sonny Bono. Remember Bono, the guy from the U2? She used to be married to him.
No,
Sonny
that
Bono.
was not the one. No, it's the other one.
What the the Edge?
No, not the YouTube group at all. No, I don't think that's right. All right, well, let me ask you a question. I mean, you've been to a conference. You presented in a professional conference in a paper that you've written.
I did.
So we can't go too far into what we're going to talk about today without getting a little bit of a review.
Wait. Actually, now you say this
right?
because something happened this morning. In some way, sort of may tie all this together. It may not, but
Okay.
I wake up this morning
Yes.
and I go to. Actually, that's the worst thing that usually happens. It's the beginning. It's really the. It's all downhill from there.
Like I was saying, that was a good thing. You're saying it's not so good to wake up. All right,
That's not-
we'll have to explore that on another show. I'm
But-
not sure. We're
So I
gonna
wake
be
up
able to-
and I go to let the dog out. We got one of them. You got one of them dogs?
had one of those dogs. Don't anymore.
Okay. Oh, well,
He got tired of
You
it, so he
ate it?
left.
you ate it? That's it.
No, he
'Cause-
had to move on to another household. But
Really?
that's a
The
long
dog-
story. We'll have to come back. No, we can't go
You
there.
got
now.
rid of your dog? That sounds sad.
Yeah, that is. Well, when you put it like that, it is kind of sad. But that's not how it happened.
Really,
he
it's
was
not-
there. My son brought him in. He had it, and son moved, and there you go.
Oh, the son took the dog with him.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. It's good. It's good.
And we put both of them in the pound. So that's how.
You
that's
had
where
them
they
both
ended
put to
up.
sleep. I like that.
Can we move off of my dog now,
So-
or the former dog? Okay.
So
go
I
on.
went to get up and I went to go and I to open to let the dog out and I saw that.
Who let the? Oh, okay.
That's it.
All right,
I like
there
that.
you go. I like it.
But the alarm hadn't been set, and it looked at the alarm thing. And it looks like a door was open. So I go downstairs and the front door to the house is open.
Ooh, that's
Right?
not a good thing. You
It's not a
woke
good
up in
thing.
the morning after the night, and
And
your
all
front
night had
door's
been
open.
open.
Okay,
Okay.
this is how a horror movie starts.
So, and my wife usually stays up later than I do because she has this friend named Raul. They're just friends.
The pool guy. Okay,
Yeah.
Well, I think
They
we-
hang out a little at night. and I-
For viewers, see the earlier episodes, and you'll know who he is.
So,
All right, go there.
so she's hanging out with Raul, and I go to bed. And so she's supposed to, so she normally just hits the thing, but she didn't.
Sure.
And so I woke up to having a discussion with, I found the door open and whatnot. And then,
Right. Not a good thing.
I thought at this time it's it was really important to, in moments like this when you're having a discussion, that's the best time to sort of WWFD.
WWFD.
Yeah, what would Freud do?
What would Freud do? Okay,
I thought
that's a
this-
complete
this-
different podcast. So you can watch that on Thursdays, but here on the channel. But
So we got to come up with, so I've got to be able to talk to her about this and through a Freudian lens. And here's what I
there you
think
go.
happened.
That's what you do.
You see,
Go.
my wife, who has been repressing some of her more aggressive urges, and so these,
Almost every. I'm just going to say it out loud. Almost every other sentence is a complete show that we need to spend time on, at least
Okay,
an
yeah.
hour, 2 hours on to dissect and figure out
well,
what's
this,
happening.
and so she has these repressed aggressive urges.
Okay.
And what would happen is unconsciously, it's a little like a parapraxis, she, quote, mistakenly didn't lock the door because underneath it, she's hoping someone will break in and kill us.
Okay. See, this is where anyone who's watching this will know that I look interested. I'm following the story. I go, oh yeah, what else in that? And then there's this thing that happens at the end. So
But she had that same look. Except
yeah, I got it. She had
and then
it. We all
her
got it.
reply was, she said, well, if I get me wrong, but there needs to be a repression barrier. And there isn't one. All of my aggressive impulses are not unconscious. so I think that really
The wife said once, "I've never thought about divorce, but homicide a couple of times." Yeah,
Really?
so
that has been but now in a way that does connect a little bit maybe with my talk. How?
yeah. So we're okay. I
was
asked
in-
the simple question, but we went down another path.
I was in New
So
Brunswick.
How was it? Tell us about
ever
it.
been to? I was on the Rutgers campus.
Okay, never been there.
Never yet.
How was it?
Haven't, well, apparently, and I realize most campuses are like this, but apparently you have to wear pants.
Oh,
Because they just,
once again,
right on.
there's always a go-to around here, and if you ever notice that sometimes it's the with or without pants.
It is.
So I'm ready for anything at this point. Go ahead.
But I'm on the New Brunswick campus.
Okay.
Which, by the way, guess what their favorite stew is?
Brunswick stew.
Actually, it's a chowder.
Of course.
No.
It's up toward New England. There's going to be a
It's
clam
a-
chowder of some sort.
It's a
Okay,
chowder.
I got it. I got it.
Which, by the way, I had a girlfriend I dated who smelled like soup. That's not a,
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a homey, warm smell.
I'm going to just sit and listen over and over again to the first 8 minutes of this podcast and try to figure out what happened. So,
Okay, but yeah.
right now I can't tell you exactly what happened.
But we're in the
All right,
New
go ahead.
Brunswick, and it was a good bunch of folks. It was the was called Psychoanalysis and Culture Conference.
Oh, okay.
So people
There
from
you go.
all over the world. There were people from New Delhi, from Ireland, from Great Britain,
Okay.
Opelika. No, that's
Okay,
it.
I'm seeing a trend here.
no, but there were-
I got you. All
there-
right, so
there were
big
lots of
conference, a
folks.
lot of people.
It was
But
nice.
psychoanalysts, right?
Most
These
of them
guys
were
very
academics, psychoanalysts.
Okay.
It's sort of it's an interdisciplinary conference. So you have folks from all a lot of culture studies folk,
Oh, cool.
and so it
So
was,
yeah, the culture with the psychoanalysis.
and so yeah, but the talk was good. We actually did talk about the content of said talk in a prior podcast, but it was about.
We set it up, but we didn't go too far. So maybe you need to kind of give us a quick overview or a couple of
Well,
thoughts from it, and also how did you think it was received? I was kind of curious about that too.
Well, there was a large gathering of people, and they seemed enthusiastic, and I
Okay.
thought that was a good sign. But
That's
then I realized they were carrying pitchforks and torches.
Okay. Yeah. Well, not unlike this podcast audience, by the way. So,
So
go
but still,
ahead.
I think it went well.
Okay. So what was the gist? What was
Here's
the?
the gist, because we talk about this that Zizek character, but
Oh,
this was sort of a semi tie to that. But the idea that that there is we move within a context that we are typically unaware of. and that it gives us the illusion of action, and it gives us an illusion of agency. And actual agency is actually intermittent. We only have moments of agency, and we are often
Okay, for our viewers and myself, agency.
agency. It's like if an example would be is if you say right now we got what's this Uma
Thurman.
Uma Thurman. She's
Yes.
doing that. She's the little girl with the climate change. Uma Thurman.
No, that's
It's not.
Thurberg, I think.
Okay,
is the last name.
okay.
Yeah, okay. But
Okay, Uma Thurberg.
good, close call almost. I'm glad I caught it before we went further, but all right,
Okay,
keep
so-
going.
So you know this. So you want to do something about this climate change thing,
Right,
and so
right.
you say, okay, well, I want to generate some agency. I will act in a way that will change things for the better. So that's an example of agency.
Okay.
But here's the catch: if what you say, I'm going to recycle,
Yes.
and that isn't that that's necessarily not a bad thing to do, but it's much less agentic than you might imagine,
Okay.
because the act of recycling and not going further and asking questions like, wait a minute, where does most of the waste come from? What are the governments and corporations that are actually doing 99% of it? Then what happens is you have a false sense of agency. You become complacent, and the problem continues to grow in the background, which
Okay,
is what
so
we see with climate change.
All right. So you tell yourself, hey, I've made an effort here. Things are going to
Boom, it's
get
good.
better and it's going to expand. However, you're just a small.
Well, you continue to be a cog in the machine that keeps running.
Okay.
And so that was an image I used in the paper, that many of our efforts are just shining the cog, and the machine keeps running.
And we keep doing it. Okay.
So the goal would be, how do we change the context, the horizon of meaning that sort of defines and directs us? And so that's where Zizek, for instance, talks about this, but it's part of Alain Badiou's philosophy and some other folks. Like, how do we enact some form of revolution or movement forward or backward? They're all wary of this notion of progression, because that in of itself can be a way of being sort of bound to context and to horizons without moving outside of them.
Yeah, it's almost like Zizek says this all the time. We think we're doing something, but wait, he starts to unravel it to us to this point where we're not making progress
It's not,
at all. And we're kind of stuck in some things. So, but couldn't it be that each individual doing their part by recycling or some other measure, and we've got thousands, 100,000s, millions maybe doing something? Does that not affect the change in the bigger system? I mean, I don't know.
It is a step, and you don't want to keep the acting locally or personal responsibility out of the equation. But he uses an example when people were protesting the Iraq War.
Right.
There were set aside times when people could go and protest, and millions of people did.
Sure.
And so they go and they protest, and then when the protest's over, they go home, and the war goes on. And so,
Right.
literally built into the system is you're allowed a false sense of action, so the machine can keep moving.
Okay.
Does that make
False
sense?
sense. Yeah, it does.
And so, for instance, what would have happened if and he uses, I think I've said this before, and it always gets people upset when I say it, but there's a quote from him that the problem with Hitler is Hitler wasn't violent enough.
Right, and that I remember that on an earlier episode.
That's right.
And when I got back in my chair, I asked you the question. You need to unpack that just a little bit
Well,
for me and for others. So
what that
I
means
think
is-
I know where Zizek's going, but you better tell us. I think.
Well, you know, the literal the political statement that Hitler hung his flag over was, "Let's make Germany great again." This whole notion of the return of the Third Reich was literally, let's get great again. We hear that somewhere else, don't we?
I don't know.
And
I think we do.
and the whole idea behind that is that it's ultimately not and I'm not knocking our conservative brothers and sisters because they have an important part to play in political discourse.
Sure.
But it represents a poisonous conservative move. It's a step backward to preserve something that was never actually really there, and it doesn't. There's no change. In fact,
Right.
the same war that propelled Germany into poverty happened all over again, because of, once again, that the coordinates, the horizon of their meaning was not altered.
Right.
So the goal would be, how do we come up with some way that moves us forward? The recycling, collective action, nothing wrong with it. That's cool. But what happens? How do we change the system? And the example that Zizek gives is Gandhi, for instance. And what made Gandhi violence is they just stopped working. They,
Right.
Things. It can be much more if when school teachers strike, and their goal is a change in their benefits or wages.
And they stop.
They just right.
That's all right.
And
They
that's
go out
a
on
far
strike.
more violent act than blowing up schools, because blowing up schools literally does nothing to alter a system. It is ultimately a conservative act in the negative conservative sense. I don't want to
Right.
again,
No, yeah.
but so what would that look like for climate change, for instance? What would it look like to be agenic, and not, I'm not saying I completely agree, but lots of folks would say, whenever we fall back on our Western notions of hyper-individualism,
Oh yeah.
because that's part of why we're in the trouble we're in now, we're literally playing into the same thing that got us in this problem to begin with. We're not thinking about it, and it's difficult for us to think about it because our horizon of meaning is fixed. The lens that we have on is, we don't question it. It just is there. And so how do we change the lens? How do we think differently and see differently enough to enact true agency?
Yeah.
And, again, and I don't know the stats on this, but if you look at, the plastic that's in the ocean, well, where does it come from? How does it get there? What sort of forces are at work that are in no way being affected by any of our individual actions? And those forces need to be questioned in some way. Now,
And you're
Zizek-
not advocating for no individual action.
no,
Right. in
It's
this
just
one.
that we have to be careful. Individual action can generate, it can discharge our sense of responsibility and allow us to stay in a place of complacency that isn't the level of agency that we need.
Got it.
So it does. And Zizek and company, they have a real, they don't like capitalism. They're not fans.
Okay.
So they would say that what the ultimate horizon is capitalism. And I talk about this in my paper, but Zizek will say that even capitalism still exists in a post-apocalyptic world, because if in the post-apocalypse, typically it's a zombie apocalypse,
Yes, it is.
and
And all the buildings are overgrown, and
Everything.
the guy's walking in the street by himself. That kind of
but
thing.
what's
Yeah,
still
I've seen
happening?
it. Seen that movie.
you still have masses of people consuming mindlessly in the
Right.
background.
Right.
So literally, the post-apocalyptic world simply reveals the very essence of capitalism: consume. And
Right.
so what he would say is that we can't even in our fantasies generate a space that is post-capitalism. And so his famous statement is, it's easier to envision the end of the world than into capitalism. So if capitalism is somehow,
Okay.
and right now we talk about neoliberalism, which in a nutshell, the way I think about it is that we are guaranteed individualistic freedom in the service of consumption, if I sort of were to define neoliberalism in that way.
All right. That's
And
one
so-
to ponder.
Yeah,
Just a
so
little bit, yeah.
literally it is our freedoms. And a wonderful example would this be is Jack, not me, but we see now when the broadening of sexual diversity, being gay was get you killed. Not that it can't in some countries. One, the margin becomes accommodated, and then suddenly you will begin to see transgendered people on commercials selling jeans and whatnot. And not that isn't a step in the right direction and whatnot, but it doesn't cause us to question and think about our own gender, our own sexuality, or sexuality in general, that might generate larger social change. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense because I think people really are sort of focused inward on themselves. Maybe that's not a great way to say that, but the idea is about what they know and their own meaning and their own sort of encapsulated worldview of how things are working. So it would take a kind of a paradigm shift to see it outwardly in some ways, and people would be more responsive, I guess.
That paradigm shift is, how do you enact such a shift? How do you create a space that generates that shift? And part of, it is in some ways, again, this would be Zizek talking about Trump, and I'm not to get political, but
oh no, you said that about 12 times, and then we went political big time. So it's all right. It's okay to talk about it, although there's people you can hear the tuning out right in this moment right now.
Well, there's a famous Sam Harris has a line. He said that Trump is a poor person's idea of what a rich person is. And there is a way that Trump, from Zizek's perspective, represents the pure essence of the American politician. He just, all the artifice has been is taken away, and he literally is sort of a hyper example of this sort of thing. And so he doesn't, there hasn't been a step in any direction with his election. Some folks on the left voted for Trump in the hope that he would literally create the sort of misery and dysfunction that would force some sort of change. Mm-hmm. And so they voted for him in the sense that he might, by his mere presence, change the horizon.
Right.
You know.
Everybody makes a bad call occasionally, but
what's really interesting about that is again, not to get political, but
too late.
That's a place of privilege, because if your life is going so good that you can vote for somebody that can mess up the country and you're still okay,
that's something to think about for sure.
That's really a privileged position. Whereas if you're really thinking like, well, you know, my gay and transgender brothers and sisters under this regime might really fare very poorly, I might ought to think about my choices, because, you know, and so I'm often a little wary of these notions that you can somehow do a protest vote.
Right,
you know,
it's going to work out for you in the end. Yes.
You know, because I'm a white middle-aged guy in certain income bracket, so it's not going to bother me. But
right.
But you know, like,
yeah, I think that's a point. So one of the thoughts I had as we were just talking is the notion that this socialism ideas come back. Mm-hmm. Versus capitalism, and my first thought is isn't there somewhere, maybe even Zizek would agree, that maybe some balance between the capitalist and the socialist, and some ideas like that might work. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out.
He has sort of this Hegelian take, in that synthesis and compromise, in a way, usually preserves the horizon, doesn't generate a shift. And if you look at Sanders or Warren's proposals, I guess Sanders probably tilts more toward the socialists. These are still squarely within, I mean, if he'd made these proposals 30, 40 years ago, he would be center. It's not these are not. So when we talk about, this isn't socialism in the way it may be practiced in, say, Sweden or even Canada. There's no, you know, like the idea of, if the cornerstone of someone's proposal is universal health care, first off, I'm not even sure that shouldn't be either a liberal or conservative concern. It should just be a concern that everybody should have.
Right. You know, when we start moving in that direction, we'll be better off. This concern is, which camp am I in?
This really shouldn't.
With something, right?
If we're going to have a political,
here's a cause. Let's do something about it. Okay, got it.
But though I have heard, particularly among evangelical conservatives, that you know that if your horizon and worldview is that this world is temporary, and that you're moving through this world to get your true reward, then it might cause you not to think necessarily about, if someone dies early, it means they get to go to their reward sooner. And so
Right.
you could see a worldview that might, take you away from being able to think about it as a. But the whole notion of the paper is just how do we think, and the first step in being able to do that is to notice the horizon in the machine. We have to be more aware of our context, that there is, and there's a famous saying by Zizek, don't act, think, or resistance is surrender. And both of those constructs, take the resistance is surrender. The minute one, particularly a violent resistance, in some ways it is literally playing with, you're still within the horizon. Resistance is still playing ball. It's still being embedded in the moment that you're in and the society you're in. When he says don't act, think, that's the possibility of becoming aware of the things you're entangled in before you begin to struggle. And if it's sort of like being caught in a spider's web, the goal would be to slowly but surely remove each strand without struggle. So it may require lots of different steps in between before one gets to the quote. They also have this construct too, because I was reading when I was this morning laying on the couch before I got here.
Right. With the door open.
The door.
No, I'm just sorry.
That was all night. I did shut the door once I got up.
Okay, too late, but yeah.
But the idea that to be able to move through this horizon, there's a philosopher named of Friedrich Hegel, whatever. Fred Hegel. Freddie H. He talks about that there needs to be a dark night of the soul, and that part of moving through our context to true agency, to be able to see the horizon in which we're embedded, one has to actually get to a 0 point, a point of what he almost despair. So you can almost think in the scene from The Matrix where there's the red pill and the blue pill, and that if you take the red pill, it is through despair. One wakes up in a dystopia. Right. We are being attacked by robots. So there is something about being able to...
It's easy to do. I'm with you on that. I don't think people have a lot of practice at that. I mean, where else do you go to learn those kind of things? I mean, basically, it takes a lot of practice to sort of, and someone to bounce some ideas off of, and maybe therapy. That's why therapy is working, I guess, for a lot of people.
See, I like what you're doing there because I need money. But therapy is one, because part of what happens in therapy, and there are different kinds of therapies. Therapies that are maybe a bit more process focused. Not only can you get someone to be open and own the things they're feeling, there are moments when you may hate your therapist, or what often happens in therapy is the thing that has to be owned is to be aware of just what sort of tensions arise in any social interaction. And the more common one is to feel less than. I think you're less likely to hate your therapist than to feel, man, I wish I was as smart as they were. Or, man, I had a patient the other day say to me, I bet everybody in your family is just, healthy and balanced and everything. I bet that's the case.
This is idealized for you.
That's right, could be,
Yeah, right.
And, I could have, first off, I could have shown the MMPI for most folks in my family and said, well, actually, I have some data set to disprove that. But what was important at that moment is to be able to say what they needed to say, but then to explore, well, what was going on with you when you said that? And then they were able to say, well, you seem to have an answer for the things that bother me. And if I can't answer them, it must be there's something wrong with me.
Right.
You know, and I don't know.
Right.
That must be there's something wrong with me.
Okay.
And so that begins a discussion of, well, let's think about that. And that narrative was far older than that moment. That they are often disempowered in moments of social interaction in such a way that there are emotional needs and attachment connections that get thwarted, and this individual particularly would react through intermittent illegal drug use.
Okay.
They would find ways to. They often feel a sense of. talk about that euthymic window of emotional dysregulation that's fairly constant, because they often find themselves in this position. Everybody else around me has it together and I don't.
Right.
And they don't even really know why they're, buying Xanaxes from folks and